Hello, this is Todd Nessa, and the reason why I'm making this video today is I want to talk just a little bit about the NDAA legislation that's been passed, which has been pretty much not even mentioned by I like this term, I've heard it recently, the fourth arm of government, which is the mainstream media, which is, if you do your research, you'll find how that's been controlled for years by the CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations. But that aside, that aside, I got a letter from my senator. Actually, I got a letter from both of my senators here in the state of Florida, and I wanted to just take some time to just go ahead and read their response, and then I'm sure I'll be ripe with some commentary once I get done reading their letter. But let me go ahead and read. This is from Mark Rubio, who is a newly elected Republican senator from the state of Florida. And this is what he writes. He says, "Thank you for writing me in regard to the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012, NDAA. I understand some provisions in this bill are contentious, yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond. As you may know, every year the Senate Armed Services Committee presents the NDAA, which authorizes appropriations for the corresponding fiscal year to the Senate for full consideration. The Senate passed this year's Defense Authorization Act on December 1st, 2011, and following a conference committee with the House, the final version of the NDAA was passed by the Senate on December 15th, 2011, by a vote of 86 to 13. So find out who the 13 were, and those are the people that are upholding the Constitution. Just throwing that in there. I am aware this bill contains some controversial provisions related to terrorist detainees and whether they should be held in military or civilian law enforcement custody. In particular, I'm referring to sections 1031, 1032, and 1033 of the Senate version of the NDAA. This legislation reiterates that in times of war, the armed forces have the authority to detain terrorists in the United States if they are members of Al-Qaeda or a group affiliated with Al-Qaeda and or assisted in the planning and execution of the September 11th terror attacks. Oh boy, I'm biting my tongue on that one. I'll hold it for now. During the Senate debate on the NDAA, Senator Mark Udall from Colorado introduced an amendment which would have struck this language from the bill. I voted against the Udall amendment and in favor of compromise language which states that the President already has the authority to detain individuals associated with Al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups regardless of their citizenship. The Udall amendment failed by a vote of 37 to 61. However, the compromise language passed 99 to 1 and is contained in the final NDAA, which does not change current law with regard to U.S. citizens' rights. You believe that? I don't. All right. To be clear, this NDAA does not change the posse comitatus, it's a tongue twister, posse comitatus Act, nor does it take away an individual's habeas corpus rights. Additionally, the language in the NDAA does not take away an individual's rights to equal protection under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, nor does it take away anyone's due process rights afforded under the 5th or 14th Amendments. If this bill did such a thing, I would strongly oppose it. I believe an act of terror against the United States is an act of war, and I believe those who commit such acts of terror should be treated as enemy combatants, not as common criminals. When enemy combatants who wish to harm the United States citizens are captured, the rights of these detainees are restricted of basic human rights. All detainees held by the United States are treated with dignity and respect despite the heinous crimes they have been accused of committing against our nation. I will continue to support a detention policy that protects the United States as well as the rights of our law-abiding citizens. It is an honor and a privilege to serve you as your president, hopefully not president, as your United States Senator. Thank you for sharing your views with me. If I can be of any help to you with regard to this issue or any other concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me. And that, again, was a letter from Marco Rubio of the state of Florida. And here's some of my thoughts on that. Number one is, like many people, I was watching live the terrorist attacks happen on live TV. I was engrossed in the coverage. I remember waking up that morning and seeing the second plane hit the second building, the World Trade Center. So I witnessed it firsthand. I saw a lot that made some real impressions on my life. The thing that I remember the most was the coverage, which was quickly it was taken out of the news feed. But the early coverage was, and this was on all the networks initially, because nobody knew what was going on, except for certain people who were involved with perpetrating this crime. But there were explosions that were happening. They were happening everywhere, and that was the word that you heard in the coverage. And this is my recollection of that day. I've since watched plenty of video evidence, going back and watching some of the footage I've seen, and then other things that I haven't seen. Testimonies of people who conveniently have perished; they're not even alive anymore. One of which was he was an expert, demolitions expert, over in the Netherlands. I think he's Dutch guy, and conveniently he was killed I think this past year, or anyway within the last year or two, and he was one that came out and stated unequivocally that from watching the World Trade Center Building 7 footage, that it was controlled demolition, and he didn't realize that that was one of the buildings that also came down that same day. At the time, he had someone that was showing him and asking for his opinion, and then he went on to become quite an expert in this whole thing, and a big part of this movement for truth, which goes beyond the media control paradigm that has been created to tell you what to believe on this issue. And let me tell you, there are many people in the media, and there are many people behind the media that are working to, whatever they tell you, that's the truth. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. And being a Christian, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The truth means something to me. It's important. It's something that the founders of this nation bled for, died for, risked their families, risked their livelihoods. Many of them suffered greatly from from signing the Declaration of Independence, and you can study that out sometime. That's pretty interesting. It might be something I can talk about in another video. But the fight for freedom, it always has a cost in the fight for truth. And people who are espousing tyranny always want to shape your perceptions towards their version of the truth, which is deception, and it's not the truth at all. It's of course a lie. I can go on and on, on that, and would probably like to more a little bit. Let me come back here specifically to the NDAA. The reason why I brought that up about 9/11, because the motivation behind passing this legislation, the ability for the public to accept it, of course, most of them aren't even aware of it because the media, of course, conveniently doesn't report it. But it all goes back to 9/11 and Al Qaeda, so that's where the real motivation is. Not